All right. Drum roll, please.
Here we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour. I'm so excited. So, I'm going to try to do a little bit of an introduction, but today's guest, Baird Kleinsmith. Did I do the last name?
You got it.
Probably.
Perfect.
Thank you. I don't know why. It's so funny. Almost every time I have a guest on, I feel like the introduction's super important. So I kind of put it on a pedestal, and then I psych myself out over name pronunciations. Like if you listen to the show, I guarantee you half of them, I'm like, did I do that right? And if it weren't in this setting, I wouldn't overthink it. But anyway, Baird, thank you so much for being here. A little bit of a background. So you're an entrepreneur.
Yep.
You're a founder.
Yep.
You're a father, a community leader, an investor. I just learned
a husband.
A husband. Don't forget that. A bike racer, an athlete. I mean, all of these different things. And I'm stoked to pick your brain. For everybody listening, I first got introduced to you or interactions with you years ago. You had just bought a storage unit or a storage property. Yeah. And I think we were chasing down a domain name.
We were.
Or
a very valuable, important domain name, and the former owner had no idea how to get a hold of it.
Did you ever?
That
we
got it.
Gap closed, right?
We got it.
Good.
We got it. Durango Storage is mine.
There we go. See? So it was fun because I got a glimpse of. I got a glimpse into what you're doing. That you had just purchased the property and building the business from that front, and then I've got to see you a few times in passing at elementary school drop off. But beyond that, it's like I was telling you, I actually don't know much of your story, and so I'm super excited to hear it because one of the coolest things about hosting a podcast is that I get to sit across the table from people and like genuinely learn from them. Mm-hmm. And I know enough about your story to know that there's a lot to learn there, and it's anyway, a lot to hear. So where I want to start though, if you'll humor me, is I'm assuming that you haven't always been had this huge storage portfolio and the business and all of that stuff. I would imagine it started somewhere. So walk me back to the pre-entrepreneurial days and kind of talk to me about that chapter of life, leading up to the transition into acquisition stuff.
I was a wantrepreneur.
There we go. Great term.
For 12, 15 years. I can't do the math anymore.
Yeah. That's a great term.
I was a wantrepreneur for forever. I always wanted to do something. I always knew that what I was doing was not what I was meant to do, and I really wanted to work for myself. But yeah, going way far back, I went to Fort Lewis College, graduated in 2005, and I decided to stick around. I met a girl in my senior year of college. She's now my wife and mother of my two kids. And I was planning on leaving Durango. I think I was going to raft guide for the summer after I graduated, and met a girl, decided to stick around, and I remember at the time.
What'd you study?
Business. Okay. Well, I studied skiing.
Majored in business.
Majored in skiing, minored in business.
I
stacked my classes into Tuesdays and Thursdays so I could ski 5 days a week.
Right.
But, no, I went through the business program at the Fort. It was valuable. I've definitely learned more about business in the time that I've been in it than I did in school.
We're going to get to talk about that. We were just reminiscing a little bit about, I was telling you when we first interacted, I was sharing an office in a shared, it was like I had a corner of a room type thing, and then we were just looking at our space here, and I'm like, man, the learning curve, if I could express how steep that learning curve is. But anyway, we'll get there. But
so I'd graduated from school, was looking for a job, and I remember the Durango Herald was where you used to go for jobs, and there was a company, Mercury Payment Systems, that was always hiring, and I thought, the place must be a terrible place to work. They're always turning people over. They're always filling these positions because people are quitting. And then I ended up going to a job fair at the Fort Lewis School of Business. I met Matt Taylor, who eventually became CEO. I think he was probably in his mid-20s at the time when I first met him. And then a few other folks from Mercury, and learned about the jobs that they had available, and they sort of judged me and identified that I'd be a good salesperson. So I thought, okay, sure, I'll try to sell. So I was hired as an entry level salesperson, working specifically with their partners. And anybody that has lived in Durango for a while has heard of Mercury. It was a pretty major employer in the area.
Right.
But I was working with our software partners initially, and then pretty quickly grew into lead business development role and ended up leading business development for Mercury for 12 years, left at the beginning of 2017. And that I left. I'd been through 2 acquisitions. We sold 60% of the company to private equity in 2010. It was a very cool experience for me. I was part of the deal team. Got to go to New York and Boston and pitch this company to investors. And
is there at that level? I'm just curious. Is there personal gain from that? Like when that company got acquired. I mean, obviously you're on the deal team. I would imagine that there's. I mean, I don't know like how that was structured, if you had equity or not, but I would imagine there was some incentives.
Yeah, the owners of Mercury were really generous with employees, and a lot of people had small stakes of equity in the business.
Oh, cool.
Including myself. So I had a small windfall, small exit in 2010 as part of that, and then 4 years later, the private equity company that had bought us, Silver Lake, sold us to Vantiv in 2014, and that was when I kind of made the most. Was at that point, a lot more of it was cashed out, but then the private equity firm Silver Lake put golden handcuffs on anybody that they thought was valuable,
right? As they should,
and that paid off over time. But I was mentioning to you that I enjoyed your interview with Alex Miller, and you guys were talking about how both of your advantages is that you've been able to keep lifestyle creep at bay and like maintain a pretty lean lifestyle. And I would say that like where I am today was only made possible because I lived lean. Like I was getting these giant amounts of money deposited into my bank account, but rather than going out and buying toys and houses, I was stashing it into investment accounts. I had always. Oh, sorry.
No, finish it off.
Well, I was just gonna say, forever, I was on the FIRE track, like achieving financial independence to retire early. Like I thought the answer to, I was happy in my jobs, but I always knew that it wasn't what I was meant to do. It wasn't what I really wanted to do, and I thought that the answer was retiring early.
It was freedom.
Yeah,
right.
I just thought like I just don't want to work. And we'll go into that part of the story, but I've now discovered that I don't want to retire early. Like I love working.
Yeah.
It's just about finding the right work that I really enjoy, but also provides the flexibility of time and resources to do what I want when I want.
Tell me more. I'm fascinated with that. So in that lifestyle creep thing, just to add a quick anecdote to it, but literally today I was talking I've got a new business development rep that started on Monday, and so we spent a ton of time together, and I was talking to her about my situation, and my wife's a real estate agent, and so our life has basically been that we live on my income, and then when she gets paid, we stack it. Yeah. And so it's forced us to really live lean, like you're mentioning, and kind of like we couldn't experience lifestyle creep even if we wanted to because it's so inconsistent. So we enjoy our life the way it is, and then she gets these big checks and we stack it, same thing. And it's the coolest thing. And I'm curious because I've had the conversation with my wife probably 100 times about like, I think it's the single greatest thing that we've done is figured out how to live below our means and not have financial stress. Yeah. And what I'm curious about from your side of it with that like living lean idea, because I've contemplated it before. I think Durango contributes to it. Yeah. And I don't know for sure, but I think like the lifestyle, we'd rather go play than, buy stuff. Yep. But I'm curious I'm curious from your perspective on it is if that was an intentional mindset, like if you understood at the time the power of living below your means and living lean, and then secondly to follow it up on it, but any ideas of like if that was intentional or what the driving force was and why?
Yeah, I think it was. I'm very risk averse. My dad went bankrupt when I was really young.
Was he an entrepreneur?
He was. He shouldn't have been. He should have gotten a sales job. Right. He would have crushed it. If he were an insurance salesperson, he would have crushed it in life. But he he was always shooting really, really high. And he was in commercial real estate, which is pretty funny. I'm in commercial real estate now. But he was in Denver in the 80s. The market collapsed. He had put a bunch of money into a development deal that failed, and he lost it all, including his marriage and ultimately his health. But I think that always sort of sat in the back of my mind. I never wanted to be in a position.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was really, really early.
Right.
And so while I can't remember that experience,
but you lived with the outcome of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've always been very conservative with money. I've always had like that backup, so that if anything ever hit the fan, if I lost my job, like I'm gonna be okay.
I tell my wife, our goal is to elevate our rock bottom.
Yeah.
That's all. That's kind of been my. Yeah. It's like I want to just make my worst case scenario slightly better. Yeah. Month over month. So anyway, but yeah. Okay. Sorry. Coming back to the like mentality behind staying lean.
Yeah. So there was that sort of like a risk aversion, like preparing for the worst, but then also I just I had this with the FIRE mentality. I had this like 4% rule in my mind. The safe drawdown limit is if you can live off of 4% of your assets on an annual basis, that money should last forever.
Right.
And so I had my number in my head of what I wanted to be able to draw as an annual income, and I knew that the number that I needed to get to for that to be 4%. And so I always had that as my target. But like long story short, in early 2017, I was getting burnt out on Mercury, what was Vantive at that point. We'd been through some acquisitions. The culture wasn't what it was before, and I'd just been doing the same thing for forever. And I was ready for something new. I got a call from a recruiter who was trying to fill a role that was perfect for me, but it was in London, in the United Kingdom. And I remember, like, I got the call from her, and I was like, no, I'm not moving to London. Like, Durango to London?
Yeah,
there's no way.
It sounds crazy.
And she's like, well, just consider it. Because on paper, I was, like, the perfect candidate for the role. These guys were trying to build the Mercury payment systems in the UK. It hadn't been done there. Our business model that we built here hadn't been done there. And they needed somebody to come over, knew the playbook, and could execute it there. And I was the perfect guy to do it. So she just said, just talk to the founders. Before you say no, talk to the founders, and then you can make your decision. And I talked to it's 2 guys over there, 2 amazing entrepreneurs that are billionaires in London. Talked to both of them separately, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a hard decision. And it ultimately was the easiest hard decision that my wife and I have ever made.
In what way?
It was. I mean, you have this opportunity to have an all expenses paid trip to London,
right?
Like 3 to 5 year trip to London with the promise of an exit that would get me to that number that I needed. Right? Yeah. And we had our daughter was 2 at the time, so the timing was
young
pretty
enough.
perfect.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll stray a little bit, but my mom is in town, and we were just looking at some old videos, and my daughter was 6 when we moved back, and we were just looking at a video of her during the pandemic, which we spent in Scotland, and she had this like beautiful London British accent that's now long gone. Of course, but it was the easiest hard decision we've ever had to make, because it was like, we have this opportunity to go live in an international city. Yeah,
you get the culture experience. Yeah. You get obviously the financial, the career growth, the
travel opportunities. Right. It was just, we just thought.
And timing couldn't have been. I mean,
it was perfect.
Kids are starting school. That's a whole different. A whole different conversation.
Yeah, if my daughter was 4 or 6, it would be.
What an adventure!
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, it was a very daunting move to go from little Durango to a city of 8-9 million people.
Right.
But it was awesome, and we miss it. Like I don't think that we won't move back permanently, but I do want to go spend an extended period there.
Maybe an investment?
To get a visa in the UK, I'd probably have to do something like that, start a business over there or something. But it was amazing. I mean, we traveled, they're very generous with their holidays over there. And that's one thing that I really like about the work culture over there versus over here, is that they take their holidays seriously. Like they, even the highest level executives, they use their vacation time. When they're on vacation, they're not available unless it's an emergency. And so we did that. Every chance we had, we traveled into Europe, Africa, Asia.
How amazing.
It was, and we towed our daughter along at the time, and then we had our son over there, and he, as soon as he could travel, we were traveling with him. I just had to renew my passport, and we were in Europe for spring break. We were in France, and I filled the last spot in my passport book. The guy, we were flying through Frankfurt, and the immigration agent gave me a stern talking to with his German accent of, "You cannot use this passport book anymore. It is full." I was like, "Okay, yes, sir."
Yes. I'm curious. You talked about kind of that. You alluded to at least the idea that at some point in your journey there was a shift from the kind of that FIRE mindset of financial security and retire early to what I'll call work-life balance, work-life integration. I still want to get there, but you kind of alluded to that there was a shift there.
Yeah.
I'm curious and then this idea of the difference in work cultures, the European work culture versus the American work culture. Did that influence how you shifted, how you looked at financial freedom and the future of your career?
There were events that happened there that led me to that. A couple of things. One, I was fired there.
That helps.
So I that decision.
Speaking of hard decisions,
it was actually. It was an amazing 3.5 years that we spent there.
The best entrepreneurs were fired.
Yeah, that business now is bigger than Mercury, is bigger in the UK than Mercury was in the United States.
Wow.
I was successful in the role, but I was growing the business at 40% when I left, but the expectations were to grow it at 100%. Right. And I didn't have the answers for how to get from 40 to 100%. And so it was time for me to go. And as part of that, my stock options in that business were, we came to an agreement where they would be paid out in May of 2020.
Okay.
And that agreement was made in December of 2019, before anybody knew anything about a incoming pandemic.
Right.
Pandemic crushed that business. I was, if I had tried to cash out in May of 2020, I wouldn't have gotten anything.
Right.
So those are still out there. Hopefully will come to fruition at some point. So I was in a position where we were moving back to the U.S. and I didn't have that number that I thought I'd be returning.
Which the plan was to go get that number.
The plan was to come back with enough money to retire, and I didn't have it.
How did that feel? Walk me through that moment. Because there's this excitement, adventure, life-changing opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it didn't burn to the ground.
Yeah.
You're doing fine, but you lose the job. Mm-hmm. Pandemic hits. Valuation of of your stock shares tanks. I mean, who knows what else is going on? And it's kind of this reset moment coming back. What's going through your mind at that point?
It was that was a clear low point in my career, in my sort of mental health of my life. But now I'm so thankful I went through that, because it's what's led me to where I am today. The other piece that happened over there that kind of led to this, this clear desire to do something on my own was, my son was born 3 months early in London. Spent 3 months in the hospital. He was really sick. He was in 3 different hospitals in London, and I was working this really high pressure job at the time. This was back in 2018 when things were really demanding in the job. And I was working in Notting Hill. He was in the hospital in Chelsea. I was commuting an hour each way on my lunch break to go see him. Maybe not an hour, 30 minutes each way to go see him in the hospital. While also juggling a 4-year-old daughter at the time. And I just thought, man, I shouldn't feel bad about going to see my son in the hospital. Like I shouldn't have to ask for time. And the people that I worked for were super understanding, really supportive, but still I put this pressure on myself that like I'm here to grow this business. I should be focused on growing this business, but at the same time, like your family's the most important thing.
Right.
And so we figured it out. I balanced it, but I remember, on one of those walks, probably on multiple of those walks between Notting Hill and Chelsea, I just thought, man, I got to do something on my own that gives me the freedom of time where if something like this happens in the future, I don't have to ask a boss for time off.
Right.
And then the other piece was, I was starting to sort of sketch out some ideas of what I wanted to do when I came home. Like well before I was fired, I started planning for what was next. And I had a friend over there, an American that was living in London. He and I shared some interests. We were both in executive level corporate jobs across the ocean. And he shared a podcast with me. It was 2 Harvard Business School professors that lead the acquisition entrepreneurship program at Harvard.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a program at Harvard that specifically teaches how to go buy a business.
Right.
And I listened to this podcast. I think it's Invest Like the Best. I don't remember the episode name, but I listened to that and I thought, oh, okay. Well, I've got capital to deploy. I don't want the risk of starting something from scratch. I really like the return metrics on using some of that capital to buy a business, lever it, and make great returns. And so I got really interested in it. I bought, there's a book called Buy Then Build. Harvard Business Review has a whole book around buying small businesses. We packed up our stuff, sent it, in a crate back here, and then we had plans to travel the UK for spring through summer of 2020. We had all of our Airbnbs booked, and the pandemic hit.
Right.
And we were basically homeless. We had to move out of our home in London.
And your stuff's already gone?
Our stuff's already, on a crate on its way here. And then we had friends who were renting our house in Durango, which luckily we kept, but we couldn't move back in until August. And so we ended up, we were like refugees. We ended up moving to Scotland for 4.5 months, and we lived somehow we found this furnished cottage on a 2,000-acre estate with a castle on it.
No way.
And we packed up everything that we wanted to take with us into our little Fiat station wagon and drove completely open roads from London all the way to the southwest of Scotland.
What a place to spend the pandemic, though.
It was amazing. It was us, and there were 3 other families on this estate. They were all in similar positions. There was a British family who worked for the embassy in Ethiopia, and they were sent home, but they didn't have a place to live, so they found a place on this estate too. So it was this mix of refugees. And now the job is gone, right? Yeah. So job's gone. This is my career gap.
This is the moment.
But this is when I decided I wanted to buy a business, but I'm in middle of nowhere, Scotland. I can't go and buy a business, so I just studied as much as I could.
Say that would have, and I can tell enough from the short bit I know you. Yeah. We share the personality trait of that had to have been the inability to take action.
Yeah.
At that moment had to have been. Hard to deal with.
It was.
So, obviously you transition into research and learning and stuff, but I can't imagine that and especially now that you know the plan. Yeah. The decision's made, but I don't know, feeling a little bit stuck.
It was a really helpless feeling, and I felt like I needed to be doing. Yeah, we're very similar in that we're both action biased, and I felt like I needed to be doing something,
right?
And all I could do was learn.
Right.
And, I'm
read another book.
Looking at all these, bizbuysell.com, looking for businesses that are for sale, trying to underwrite them and evaluate them. But there was very little I could do from there. So I don't regret any decisions that I've made, but I wish I would have just enjoyed the piece a bit more than I did.
Yeah, but that's that conflicting. It's a lot like what you were saying even when you were working and your son being born early and stuff that. One of the things that's tough about it's tough about fatherhood in general, I think, but I've experienced it at a different level in entrepreneurship is there's these conflicting realities of like, I want to be there and be a present dad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have an obligation to support my family, and you know, I have these strong desires to give them an amazing life and all of that, and the two oftentimes are directly in conflict with one another, and it's so tough because at the same time too, nobody's signing our paychecks,
right?
So it's like, you know, I have on paper I've got the freedom, you know, like I can, I'm never gonna miss a baseball game, I'm never gonna miss a school assembly, you know, like, which is amazing, but it's also like that trade-off.
If you don't work, eventually it's going to dry up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, so, if I'm not moving it forward, you know, it's moving the other direction. So yeah, I get that like, I there's no way I would have been able to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, even though you're on this amazing estate in Scotland with, you know, and this, I'm just picturing this like amazing picturesque setting, which, and I'm sure
it was cool. It was, I mean, the weather was horrible. April was beautiful. The rest of the summer was like worse than like the worst winter in London, but it was beautiful. Very, very secluded.
So that's kind of coming to an end. And at this point, you know what you're going to do?
So then we get back to Durango, August of 2020. You know, kids start school, preschool, and I didn't know what was next. I thought I wanted to buy something. I rented an office space just to get myself out of the house and
be in like business mode. Yeah.
But I never, you know, I really like this idea of buying a business. But everything I looked at, I just thought, can I see myself running that business? I couldn't see it. Like I couldn't see myself juggling inventory and a big team of employees and service schedules and like all that. And then I listened. I was on a mountain bike ride, listening to My First Million podcast, and I heard a guy named Nick Huber, who described he's very different now. He's like a big internet personality, but back then he was like 2 years into his journey of buying mismanaged mom and pop storage facilities, primarily in the Southeast and Northeast. And I just thought, man, I could do that. Like, it doesn't sound operationally complex. Sounds like it's a pretty simple playbook to turn these things around. It requires some capital, but you know, capital I have.
Right.
And
it's also tangible.
Yeah, it's tangible. It's like it seemed like a very simple business model. Like, you got the benefits of, you know, of buying a business, adding value through operations, but then you get some of the benefits of real estate. Like, you know, the ability to borrow money, you know, the preferable tax treatment, all that. And so, talking about bias towards action, I didn't think about it. Like, the next day I went and I pulled up Google Maps and I drew a 60-mile radius around Durango, and I manually built a spreadsheet of all the storage facilities in Durango, Farmington, Mancos, Cortez, Pagosa, you know, Bayfield, and then I did the manual work of then going through the county assessor databases to figure out who owned them. If it was a business that owned it, I then went to the Secretary of State website and figured out who registered that business, and I typed up, it was like 50 letters that I typed up and I put in the mail. And I just remember feeling so embarrassed when I typed the letters up. It was a form letter, but I hand addressed every envelope, you know, licked every envelope, put a stamp on every envelope, and I put this stack of like 50 envelopes in a mailbox. And this was November of 2020. And I remember just like wanting to pull that stack back out of the mailbox. It was too late. And how come? I just thought, nobody's like, these people aren't going to sell me their business. I don't know anything about, you know, buying or running a self-storage business. Like, you know, these people are probably getting letters from tons of people like me. I even had friends who were like, like friends who were in real estate who even downplayed it, and they're like, they know what they have. They're not going to sell it to you. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, like a week or two later, I got a call back from a guy in Seattle who owned a facility in the Farmington area. And he's like, hey, good timing on your letter. I was thinking about putting it on the market in the spring. You know, if we can come to a deal, let's do it. And he gave me his price. My business career, sort of put me at a level of comfort with like financial modeling
Right.
that I was able to sort of scrape together an underwriting spreadsheet and figure out that the deal made sense
Enough
at
to be
the
dangerous.
number that he wanted. And so I said, okay, all right, I'll do it. And then I had to figure out how to borrow, the money. I wasn't going to come up with all the money
Right.
in cash to buy the property. So I had to figure out, I had to find a bank to lend me the money. I was able to do that and closed on it in February of 2021 as my first purchase.
That is such a fascinating approach to it. I love it. Like ballpark is about 50 letters that you sent out.
Yeah.
And you got one?
I actually got 4 out of that.
You did?
So 3 of them were a direct responses from the letters that I sent. One of them took a follow-up call to reach the guy, and he said he never got my letter.
It's so cool though. Like I want to get into your mind a little bit on that. Like, so you're researching. I mean, obviously there's been months to, figure out what you want to do. And we're similar in that sense too, that once the decision's made, it's go time.
Yeah,
I don't have to think about it anymore. We're going for it. But what's unique and I think rather remarkable about your approach, anybody else across the table from me, I would have expected that, they sat and waited for one to hit the market or, browse biz by sell or, whatever. Find there's even like, stock tickers for partial.
Oh yeah,
I mean, whatever.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
those other paths with less resistance.
Yeah,
and
easier
and less. I don't know, fear of less opportunity for rejection.
Yeah, totally.
Like that's
less opportunity for looking stupid.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you got to be willing to look stupid. But I love that you proactively. I mean, that was a significant amount of work.
Yeah.
To map it, chart it, find the contact information.
Super tedious. It didn't take a lot of days because I didn't have anything else going on, but it was like 3 solid days of just like manual scraping. And, I could have found software to do that for me. I probably could have paid a subscription that gave me a database that made that much easier. But I think an advantage, and I didn't know this at the time, I was just doing whatever I could figure out. But I think an advantage was that I just went and did the work. I didn't think too much about trying to make the work easier, more efficient. I just went and
what a great takeaway. Yeah, because and especially nowadays, my dad always says that the difference between good and great is that much, and he gestures, and he's like, so do that much, like do the thing to close that gap. But I think sometimes too, especially now with like AI and everything's automated and, we've got the world at our fingertips, literally, we forget. Like one of the things that I do every year, I handwrite thank you cards to all of our clients.
Yeah, not scalable.
And it's getting, it's getting tedious, like hundreds of them. Yeah. But I'm committed to it because it's like, it's something that nobody else can replicate. Mm-hmm. It's not scalable, to your point, and it differentiates me, and it's a genuine show. Like people understand that it's sincere because it takes a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
And I also, quick side note on it, I love the exercise because it forces gratitude for me because I'm writing people how grateful I am for them.
Yeah.
I'm mailing out a stack like that. But,
absolutely.
But what I think is fascinating about that is that it got results. Because had you not been willing to, do that, you would have never known that those businesses were willing to sell.
Yeah. And through that process, I was able to learn about these properties. Like the guy in Seattle, I had to work really hard to find his address, and I'm like stalking the guy on the internet, figuring out what's his story. Why is he in Seattle and he owns a property in Farmington, in New Mexico? And
you're learning about competitors while you're at it, and you don't know it. I mean, all sorts of stuff.
And so when he called me, I was surprised he called, but at the same time, I knew a little bit about him. I knew a little bit about the situation. I knew what he had bought it for, a few years earlier, and I was a bit more prepared for the conversation than had I just uploaded a database into a form letter builder and had somebody else send them out. So I think there were some advantages there. But my hit rate, the 4 out of 50, not common. But I got really, really lucky. My timing was
but it only takes one.
Impeccable. Yeah,
and that's what's cool. It's like I don't know. That's a neat approach for me, especially because my generation and just kind of I don't know, my sphere of influence. We're always looking for how to optimize or make it easier or whatever. Yeah. And what a good reminder that sometimes you got to just do the work.
Yeah, totally.
Sometimes you got to just get it out. Were you surprised that it worked?
Yeah, I was. I still am today. You mentioned this in your chat with Alex. I still think about man, I'm so lucky. Like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm so grateful for everything that I have. In fact, you know, like, a little bit, part of me is like, when's this going to end?
Right.
Yeah, I'm worried that you know, catastrophe is just, you know, just down the road. Things are too good to be true.
Yeah, but that's probably a continuation of that living lean mindset.
Yeah.
Which it's interesting too, because like you know, I share that. I'm always just like, finally, I feel like my business is not going to just. I finally feel like it's stable, you know. Yeah. But it's still, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, the next things. And as a result of that, like we talked about, it's forced me to stay lean and like, you know, save and have cushions and stuff. Yeah. So it's such an interesting like thing to navigate of that fragility of what you've built, but then also creating backup, you know, elevating the rock bottom side of it. It's wild.
And I'm definitely, I'm taking more risk today than I ever have in my career, but it's very measured risk. And I'm, you know, I always have the worst case scenario in mind. And so like all of my debt, I have a lot of personally guaranteed debt, like, you know, a lot. Right. But all of that, like I was, again, like I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I studied enough to know that like one of the biggest risks for me was interest rate risk. I was buying all these properties at historic low interest rates at really low financing costs. And I expected that would change. And so like one great thing I did was I negotiated, you know, very long terms on my interest rates, and most of my debt is fixed for 10 years. Had I settled for 3-year terms, I'd be refinancing properties at you know, triple, double at least what my current interest rates are. Yeah. So at least now I have that 10 years to, you know, where, you know, the principal portion of my payments will pay the debt down to a point where even if interest rates are in, you know, in whatever 7 to 8 years until they adjust, I'll have, you know, such low balances of debt that even if my interest rate is double, it won't impact me as greatly. So, do you believe in the
be greedy when others are fearful when others are greedy?
Yeah, it's easy to say, harder to do. Like right now is probably one of those times where there's a lot of fear, but I find it really hard. I've gotten much more conservative. I haven't bought anything in the last October 2023 was the last time I bought a property. Really?
Finish the thought.
I've gotten. I think I have that fear that others do, and so I haven't turned that corner of. And the other thing too, though, is that like I'm comfortable, and I don't want to.
There's no need for risk, for that big of risk right now.
No, there's not.
Yeah, and so one of the things, I bought my first investment, I've got some residential real estate investments, and I bought the first one in 2021.
Was that in Moab?
Vacation I've got that one, okay. And then this one's in Bayfield.
Okay.
And it's been great because that one was the low similar, you know, low interest rate. It cash flowed immediately. It's been amazing. And that helped me then take the risk on Moab. Yeah. Because Moab, I'm hoping, you know, time will tell, that I did I bought when nobody else dared. Yeah. You know, I think that the values are fair, but the interest rate, I bought at a 7% interest rate. Yeah. And it'll break even. It's not going to cash flow anything crazy, but I've got I've got the other investment that's going to help cover it and whatever. And my hope is that if rates ever drop, you know, obviously I'm a one refinance away from that thing being great cash flowing. Worst case scenario right now, it's break even and we get to enjoy it, and so it's all good. But it's kind of that, like, I don't know, measuring how big of a risk you're willing to take. And that's what I was curious about, is because you kind of talked about that you grew up very risk averse, which caused you to live below your means, stack it, you know, like which obviously was beneficial because you get to leverage that later. But then you also had that story about your dad, and he bet big and risked it all, and it didn't work out. I'm curious how that has influenced your relationship with risk, because then at some point you took a big risk. You know, you made the investments, you decided you're going to go out on your own and do this whole thing. Walk me through that, like, because you got to see the downsides to risk. Did you ever get to see the upsides to risk when you were growing up?
No, I didn't. Because no, I didn't. I mean, he failed and died young. You know, my mom was a teacher, so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity there for entrepreneurial risk. But I guess I got to witness it some in some of the entrepreneurs that I worked for. But I think the key difference, I learned a lot from my dad, both what to do and not to do. And, that's one of the reasons I buy existing properties is that, maybe I could go and develop ground up properties, but that's where I see a lot more risk. That's how he lost his money. I know that I'm buying something that is, that is existing.
Right. There's a bottom line. Yeah. There's a baseline.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's still an asset.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And so, I think that I think the other thing too that's helped is that I built a track record of successful projects. Like I'm buying mismanaged properties that are performing well below their potential.
Right.
Being run on pen and paper, zero marketing, zero web presence. And I ran that playbook. I've run that playbook 10 times now. And all of those were like, the first 9 were all very small bets. Like any one of them could have gone wrong and it wouldn't have beat me. The 10th, if it went wrong, it could have crushed me. When it comes to real estate, commercial real estate, properties are valued based on their net income,
right?
And the net income as a percentage of the purchase price, known as a cap rate. And right now, like going cap rates for storage is probably around 7%. When I bought that last one, it was probably around the same. I bought it at a 2.9% cap rate. So I needed to more than double its net income to basically make it make it worth what I paid for it. But I just knew, like I looked at the rent roll, and like the prior owners were collecting less than half of what their customers should have been paying.
Right.
With zero adjustment to prices, just collecting what was due. And so it was a huge risk. I mean, it was a $12 million purchase. And I got a bank, thank you. I don't know. I should mention the name of the bank, but it's a local bank that I have most of my debt with, and they've been amazing. They took a leap on that with me, and it's paid off. Like we've tripled revenue and more than tripled net income. But it was a huge risk.
A huge risk.
Like I think about that now, and I think, man, why did I do that? How did I do that? And
I'm curious about that. Like, so 9 successful ones.
Yeah.
And then now there's this 10th opportunity that it sounds like the risk is significantly higher.
Yeah.
Why? What was the thought process? 2-part question. 1, why at that stage take that big of a risk? 2nd, what made you believe it would be worth it?
Yeah. Again, it was the confidence in the playbook. Like I had executed the playbook perfectly 9 times previous.
So it was confidence in yourself? In executing the playbook?
Yeah. In myself and what we...
The track record.
Yeah,
Evidence would suggest that it would continue.
I could do it. And the other piece too is I just really like fixing things. Like I saw this potential project and I thought, that could be really fun.
It
could be really fun to take this thing that is a disaster today and make it what I think I can make it.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster. It was more of a disaster than I even knew.
Of course.
Going into it. I mean, once we closed and took over, I mean, we sent out our welcome email, like we're the new owners. And I'm not going to name the property to respect the locals who previously owned and managed it. But we sent out our welcome email, and we had like 200 bounce backs, or like people that emailed us saying, "I've never been a customer there. Like I moved out 5 years ago. I moved out 7 years ago. Why are you emailing me?" Like as soon as those responses started coming back, I was like, "Oh boy, we have a serious problem."
Here we go.
And long story short, it took like 3 months to get it on track. We had to cut locks off of like 200 units just to try to figure out who was in them. People were, we were contacting people thinking they were in unit D338, and they're like, "No, I'm in E521."
Right.
And we're like, "Oh my God, we don't know who's in any of these units." So we did our best to track everything down, and then we ended up cutting locks off of units, and I was like crawling through units just trying to find contact information, shipping labels, and all that. And luckily we didn't end up, we reunited people with stuff that they thought was gone like years and years ago. They just stopped paying their bills and they thought their stuff had been auctioned. One guy was in a house fire and was totally incapacitated, and storage unit was not his priority. And, he just thought it had been auctioned. It was gone. We, one of those units we cut the locks off of, we found his name. I contacted him and he was like, oh my God, my stuff is still there. I'll come get it tomorrow.
Yeah. How cool.
Yeah. And, now it's, we've cleaned all that up and it's humming, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, taking something that is really rough today and making it really smooth.
And fixing it. Yeah. More so than the money side of it. Like, do you think, especially now, I mean, obviously, now there's, the money side of it evolves, but in terms of driving motivation at this stage for you, if you had to weigh, I don't know, the challenge of it, the reward of fixing something or turning it around, and then, money, percentage wise, as far as motivators.
I would say that there has to be a reward in addition to the satisfaction.
Right.
If I'm going to spend that amount of effort, take on that stress, it's not just going to be for the sake of the satisfaction of looking at something that's nice. It's got to generate a positive financial return. So the money's, admittedly, the money's a really important part of it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Walk me through. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you also you founded a startup too.
Yeah.
Right?
So as part of this, this buying storage properties, some of them came with on-site managers, like somebody sitting in an office, renting units, collecting payments. The first one included somebody in that position, and she was miserable. She was super grumpy. She was not customer service oriented, and so I let her go, and I took over as the manager of this property. I was like, what better way to learn about how to operate a self-storage property than to be the manager of a self-storage property? And so I did that, and I was doing it remote from Durango. I wasn't traveling to Farmington.
This was for that first one?
Yeah, and I set it up so that customers could rent a unit on the phone or online. They'd get their gate code by email and text message. The unit would be ready for them. I hired a site manager, like a maintenance guy that readied units when somebody moved out. He'd sweep them, make sure they're clean, leave a keyed lock for the customer to use on the floor of the unit, and then we put a combination lock on the unit to secure it. And they're smart combination locks that we were able to link with our software so that the customer would get their gate code and their lock combination in their text and email when they rented a unit. So I didn't have to be there. I had somebody there for the physical stuff.
Right.
And so I thought, man, I don't need an on-site customer-focused manager for these properties. These can be managed remotely in terms of operations and customer service. We need people to do the maintenance and the physical readying of units, but customer service can be remote. And I had heard that some folks were successful hiring in the Philippines. I was very cost conscious.
Yeah,
I was trying to maximize cash flow of the properties, and I just figured why not try hiring offshore? And because it would have been very expensive, and I couldn't afford to pay somebody to manage I couldn't afford to pay an American full-time American to manage that one property.
Right.
It would have just thrown the financials completely off. So I tried hiring in the Philippines, and the time zone difference was super challenging. I went through a couple of people that were, I was asking them to work overnight, and it's very common for people in the Philippines to work U.S. hours, but I just found that it was problematic, and I had heard that, there were very educated, bilingual, remote workers in Latin America that were in our same time zones, and I could get, similar cost efficiencies by hiring in Latin America. And so I ended up finding a website that was a job board that connects U.S. business owners with remote workers in Latin America. I posted the job, and I ended up I started by hiring a customer service rep to answer the phones. A young lady named Andrea who lived in Venezuela at the time. She now lives in Colombia. And she was great, excellent English. She was super driven, really loyal, super thankful for the job. And she was, she was really, really, the money for her was great.
It was good money.
She was getting paid
win-win-win.
She was getting paid 10x what she would earn working for a local company, and so I just realized, man, there's and then I guess again I then ended up, I'm like, well, I need to replace myself with somebody in Latin America. I need an operations manager. So I found somebody again in Venezuela. She's no longer with me. I have somebody in El Salvador that replaced her a few months ago, but I was so astounded by the level of talent that I could find there. I just thought, man, this is amazing. This is a tool that could help more U.S. business owners augment their domestic teams, because we have a strong team of local site managers that ultimately, I pay our site managers as much as the former customer service managers. It's just they're focused on maintenance. Right. But I augment them with a nearshore team in Latin America that's focused on customer service and operations. And but it was really hard to find those folks. I got hundreds of applications. There were, most of them were really unqualified. It took a lot of work to find these diamonds in the rough. And I thought, man, there's an opportunity to make this way easier for other U.S. business owners. And so I actually I approached the job board that I used and tried to buy it, and they refused to sell it to me. I don't know why. They should have sold it, because it's since kind of collapsed and it's not relevant anymore. But so maybe it's a good thing I didn't buy it. But through that process, I got really excited about this opportunity of connecting Latin American workers with U.S. businesses. And I was researching the company I wanted to buy, and I found a conversation between them and somebody else on Twitter, and the other person they were chatting with had an issue. They weren't solving it, and he said, "I'm going to start a competitor, and you guys are going to be done." And I tracked him down on LinkedIn and shot a message to him and just said, "Hey, curious, did you ever do anything with this?"
Were you serious about that?
And we ended up chatting, and he had a small recruiting agency that he had started, just him and one recruiter in Mexico. And I just said, "Hey, would you be at all interested in partnering? I really want to get into this industry." And he said, "Sure, yeah, come on." Longer conversation than that, but we identified that we had a similar vision for what could be built. His strengths and my strengths aligned really well. I'm very growth and sales oriented. He's an engineer, very process oriented, and we complemented each other really well. So in April of 2023, we decided to launch Hire LATAM. And it's grown really quickly. We've got 25 people across a dozen countries in Latin America. Ed is Puerto Rican originally, but he lives in St. Louis. So Ed and I are the only two in the States. 23 others are across all across Central and South America, and then Mexico as well. Yeah. And that business is it's thriving.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
And I can totally see how that. I can see that transition. We utilize VAs, and I actually think there's a bad brand on VA. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a better. Honestly, they're just remote team members.
They're remote staff. Totally.
They're Sarabi is my main one, and she's so incredible. Yeah. Talented on top of it, and it is so great in terms of the win-win dynamic with it. In fact, I think a lot of business owners, because of the term VA, mm-hmm. I've always, virtual assistant or whatever. It took me forever to finally adopt and trust, a help like that. Yep. And then once we did, we're like, oh my goodness, game changer for us. And she loves it. She actually left her. She was with she was with a group, and then worked with us for over a year, and then now we pay her directly, and she's 1099, and she just got a raise. I mean, she's amazing. She's a part of the team, literally. Yeah. Yep. So anyway, I see the value in that, and I also see how I see how that need would arise, but I'm fascinated that then you would turn that into another business. Yeah. So I'm curious. I want to pick your brain and learn from you a little bit the differences on, kind of this growth by acquisition model, and then the startup one. Yeah. For me, I've never bought a business. I've bought real estate investments, which I tend to prefer over businesses. If only you could make the income that you could make right away. That'd be amazing. Yeah. But the passiveness of it, I've loved. But starting a business for me it's been amazingly rewarding in the sense that I'm creating something. I actually, the fact that you were in here this morning, I have 8 full-time employees now here locally, and we partnered up with another company this morning even, and nice. It's so cool for me to I get a lot of satisfaction in knowing that I'm creating value for others as well.
Yep.
That like I'm building jobs for people and I'm bringing money into the Durango economy and like. But I remember my first sale and I got my QuickBooks account set up and I send the invoice and whatever and they pay it and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yep.
Now there's money in the account. Like what just happened? This thing is like out of thin air happening.
Yeah.
But gosh, has it been a lot of work.
It is.
Like, I mean, a tremendous amount of work. And in fact, I think I maybe told this to Alex, but to be totally transparent, if I knew how much work it was, I don't know if I would have done it. Like, thank goodness I was naively, just cluelessly optimistic that, I could go start an agency and make it happen.
It's hard.
But I'm curious for you, because you've got the benefit of, both, and you've gotten to experience both. Walk me through the differences, your approaches to them and just how they varied.
Yeah, so I think that the real estate investing provides a nice, stable income that allows me to take other risks like starting other businesses. Although it's stable income that comes with risk.
Right.
It's they're all debt financed properties, and anytime there's debt, there's risk. But I look at that, so that pretty much runs itself. I've got an operations manager in El Salvador. She runs that business, and I dip in as needed. And I'd say Hire LATAM is more of a passion project. There's the self-storage. There's yes, people move. They have divorces, death, displacement. Storage is a need, and we're filling that need, and we're trying to make it as an amazing experience as possible. Yeah. Our goal is for people to get off the phone with us and think, wow, they are surprisingly friendly and helpful, which is uncommon in storage. Right. But it doesn't. I don't get the satisfaction out of that. It's financially it's great. It's a good income, but it's not super satisfying. Especially, I haven't bought anything for the last 18 months, so I don't get that improvement satisfaction. But then Hire LATAM, Wednesdays are our team meeting where we've got everybody on a Google Meet across all these countries, and it's the highlight of my week.
Yeah.
I get to all these people are so amazing, different cultures, but we all have shared values, and that business is it's a mission-driven business. Our mission's a bit backwards. We are not. Our mission is to find great jobs for as many great Latin Americans as we can.
Right.
Our goal is not to maximize revenue. Of course, it's a business. We want to make revenue and profit,
sense.
but our primary our primary measure, our focus is how many great people can we find great jobs, and it's truly life-changing. And that team, they're all people that are in that position. They're all everybody that works for Hire LATAM is in a Latin American country with very few economic opportunities, and they've found a career that helps them live great while staying home, staying in their country, and they're all focused on helping others do that. And so there's financially it's nowhere near what what the rest of my the storage business generates.
Do you think it could be?
Yeah, I think it could be far more.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I was curious about, and speculatively, but I would think, generally speaking, obviously there's exceptions, that there's more upside to starting a business than especially buying a real estate centric business. The theoretically, it can scale. I mean, it can really go.
Yeah.
You can only rent so many. You'd only get to 100%. Capacity on the storage units.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what's kept me going, to be totally honest with you. It's I'm almost there. I'm almost, it's one tweak away, one tweak away.
Yeah, there is no limit. There's no limit for you. There's no limit for me with Hire LATAM. Whereas you're right, the commercial real estate, there is a certain limit there. But yeah, I mean, you can sell marketing services to anybody in the country and in the world. There's no limit to what you could build there.
Right.
And
as long as I can figure out the processes and the outfit, which we're close, but
we're not that close.
Well, that's what I was curious about. And I love that. One of the things that I think has contributed in an enormous way to Ascent Digital's success, and it has not come it hasn't always been this way, but is our values. And like hiring people that are aligned with our values and the culture and that side of it. And that's been one of my steepest learning curves. Some of the biggest mistakes I've made has been letting people that fit the values walk away and bringing in people that didn't, and not knowing, but just because I'm trying to run the business and, you know, solve problems. And I love that idea that, you know, this is that mission-based organization, and it sounds like, you know, you've got kind of, I don't know, that you're able to transfer that mission. Talk to me about that. Like, walk me through the management process, the hiring, like with the leadership hat on now, not the entrepreneur hat on. Walk me through the culture that you're building there and that mission-based side of it, and how you're keeping that going.
It's been a process, but I'd say from day one, it's just been a really positive, like, have fun, do great work, you know, work really hard type culture. And I think that I can't say that that's like, I can't say that that's totally from Ed, my co-founder. And I think that, you know, the most important person with that was our first hire, Sophia. She's in Monterrey, Mexico, and she is she's our head of recruiting, but she's also our chief culture officer without the title. And you know, she's our head of recruiting, so every new hire goes through her, whether it's for a client or for us internally. And so I think she's been just an amazing check to make sure that everybody we bring in matches that culture.
Culture fit, yeah.
And we've had a bit of turnover over the last few months, and part of that was like getting some people out who didn't match the culture as much. And it's amazing, like, the weight that you feel lifted when you know, people that maybe were performing at work but weren't performing, you know, culturally with the team.
Isn't it wild? And you almost can't until it's gone. Like, are you familiar with the frog in the cold water analogy?
Remind me.
I'll butcher
it,
but it's basically like if you put a frog in boiling water, it'll jump right out.
Yeah.
Put a frog in cold water, slowly bring it up to boil, it'll boil to death.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way for me to explain how I've experienced a bad culture fit. Is it's like so hard to pick up on it until it gets bad enough, and then it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it's lighter. You know, things feel better around here and stuff. What I have yet to figure out is how to identify it earlier. Yeah. You know, because we're busy running a business, and, you know, you put up with a lot when you got a lot going on, and you've got clients that you know, needs get met. But I think that, you know, your point about turnover there, especially if you're building a high-performing team, especially and a mission-based one for sure, I think high turnovers comes with the game. Yeah, because I don't know how else. Because, you know, I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm trying to build a very high-performing team, and part of that is that I have to just get comfortable with turnover. Which I hate.
Hire slow, fire fast.
Just like part of the game. You know, but yeah. So, walk me through then how it's been just from the business ownership, you know, perspective on it. There's also like such different worlds.
Oh yeah, totally.
Buying versus building. Yep. But then there's also like the tangible nature of your storage portfolio versus kind of this intangible digital. You know, everybody's remote and virtual stuff. Yeah. What's that been like?
The other key difference too is that I have a partner in Hire Latam.
Yes, good.
I'm actually a minority owner. I own 40%. My partner Ed owns 60%. He's the primary operator. He's the CEO. He's the day-to-day. I think I'm shorting myself to say I'm purely an advisor, but I'm less involved in the day-to-day operations. I'm more. Yeah, I'm jumping in as needed in that business, and I'm not the only one making the decisions. Right. Like, in fact, I try to push most of the decisions to Ed to like enable him as the CEO, and only really get involved when I need to. So it's it's more. I'm thinking. I think Ed's more execution, and I'm a little bit more vision, like trying to figure out like where do we go next, while Ed's like trying to figure out how we do our best work with what we're doing today. But it's a good partnership. Whereas, you know, storage is. I'm the only one. I'm the only owner. I don't have investors. Like, you know, every decision that's needed goes through me. So I don't have a partner there. But Yeah, it's very different, and it's challenging to straddle the two worlds at times. I don't know how. Was it Jack Dorsey was the CEO of Square and Twitter at the same time?
Yeah.
I don't know how he would do that for two massive publicly traded companies. Like, I struggle to balance between two unrelated businesses without even being the CEO of one of them. So
yeah, but has it been hard navigating having a partner, like because you're used to kind of operating on your own now as an entrepreneur side of it?
Yeah, at times, but we work really well together. We have a shared vision. I can't actually think of any conflicts that we've had. Like, we probably should have had more conflicts at this point. We'd probably be growing faster if we had if we had battled a bit more.
Right.
But no, it's actually been it's been really refreshing. And I think if I ever do start anything again in the future, I'll want to do it with a partner.
Really?
Yeah, just because I know my limitations. I know what I'm good at, and that's not everything. And I think it's amazing to have a partner that covers your gaps. I mean, I saw it with Mercury. That business was founded by two brothers who were on completely opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Jeff was like this grand visionary, like, he was like, all over the place. And then Mark, his brother, was a technologist who was really, pragmatic and focused. And the only way that business worked was those two,
because there was both
balancing each other.
I've got a business partner at Ascent. She's our vice president of operations, and it is so funny because you talk about like opposite ends of the spectrum. So much so that like sometimes it can be fire and gas,
Yeah.
But when it works, man, does it work! Like it's the coolest thing to have those complementing strengths and complementing skill sets and stuff, because I'm like that. I'm all over the place. Like, I'm a huge visionary. I've got all these big ideas. I want them done yesterday. I'm like thinking I'm like whatever. And then she's the one who has to actually execute and, make it happen. And stuff. And it's great because it keeps me in check. And I think I push her forward, like, I think we couldn't do it this way, or we can get that done. And I laugh sometimes because I'm like, I'm learning a lot about business partnership and business ownership, and like I said, the learning curve has been very steep for me. But man, if it were just me, we wouldn't get anything done.
Yeah,
like actually, you know what I mean? Like,
you'd have a lot of ideas.
Yeah,
but
and they'd be all half baked, and we'd execute on 3 of them, and we'd be running all around. There's no way it would work. There's no way. Yeah. So having that balance, I'm fascinated with the fact that if you started something again, you'd have that you see that.
Yeah. I don't know. I also just the other thing too is that I don't have the time to put.
Right.
I think if you have two people, it multiplies the amount of like effort that can go into something, and starting something is way more work than buying something existing today.
So coming back to the risk thing and that idea of, because obviously, I mean, you're to the point, you're established.
Mm-hmm.
Like by all definitions, I would say you've made it. So, the risks have paid off on your end. But, I know you've got the 2 kids and, you're raising your family and stuff like that. Knowing your background with, watching how your parents, how risk panned out for them and now your experiences now, as it relates to your kids, I mean, are you hoping that, they're risk takers, or is the dream that you've taken enough risk that they don't need to be, or kind of like what's your relationship with risk as it relates to fatherhood? Yeah,
no, I don't think they're not going to be set. Like they're going to have to take some risk in life. I hope that they will have learned from some of the risks that I've taken, but that they know, someday I can't really talk to them today about the financial metrics and the, and how I've mitigated the risk. But someday if they're interested, I'll teach them. But at this point, my daughter wants to be an editor. She loves reading and she wants to edit books. AI might not make that a viable career choice for her in the future, but and then my son wants to be a firefighter. So
he's got that squared away.
Yeah. So there's some risk there, but I hope they take some. I hope they. I learned a lot of what not to do from my dad. I hope my kids learn more of what to do from me. Yeah.
That's I've loved that sentence. Yeah. Learning what to do from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or some ideas for it.
Right. At least. Yeah. At least. Yeah. Because like I hope that my kids know that they're capable of taking risk. You know what I mean? That like we can handle it. That we're capable and strong enough and whatever, and like we can grit our way through it. I think that's kind of the stage that I'm at right now, is like I want them to have the confidence to know that whether it's like my son, he wanted to play with one of his buddies, and we made him ask, and his buddy's dad is their baseball coach. So we made him ask him. Like go talk to him, figure it out.
Oh yeah.
And I loved
That's
it.
Perfect.
And so we were talking about it yesterday with my wife. I'm like, well, now he did his part, and now let's make it happen. Now we'll text the parents and like get involved and stuff. But like I think maybe it's a confidence thing more than anything, because that's one of the what calculated risk has taught me, and it's a lot like actually you alluded to it with the playbook is I think how you referenced it, giving you the confidence to take that 10th risk, because if you never give yourself the chance to succeed, you don't really get to build. Like if you stay in that comfort zone, that safe box, you stay in the corporate job or whatever. I mean, you build some confidence, but that's been the biggest change for me since I've been an entrepreneur versus an employee. Is the confidence. Of like, I can handle it. Like I was joking. Speaking of turnover, we're working on replacing a pretty critical position right now. And I was joking with my team. I was like, hey, it's just today's tragedy. It's all good. But it does get you this like, I don't know, just this level of confidence. And maybe that's more what I'm thinking when I'm thinking about like that risk willingness to pass down. It might be more of a confidence thing. Would you say that you've accomplished FIRE? Like, because you kind of talked about that, a new relationship with that idea and to work-life balance now.
I think I've found work that I have no desire to retire from.
That's
I have and an income that supports the life that I want to live.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, again, like we were just talking, like I pinch myself sometimes, and I think about, man, life is too good to be true. Like
it's wild sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to Europe for 3 weeks this summer to ride our mountain bikes in Austria and Italy, and I don't need to be. I'm not like asking a boss for time off to do it, and but life. I'm very grateful. Life can change in a moment. We as a family, we learned this recently. My wife's dad passed away of colon cancer a long time ago, pretty young, and so my wife was. She had to do colonoscopy early, and this was in October of last year. Routine colonoscopy, no symptoms that suggested anything was wrong, and they found a tumor. And she had cancer, which was just like, it turned our world upside down. Luckily, she had surgery in December. It's gone. She's not back to 100%. And we learned that she has Lynch syndrome, which is it's a genetic disorder that puts her at a really high risk for colon and some other soft tissue cancers, and there's a 50% chance that our kids have it. So I don't know how I got into this, but like I think I'm just grateful for every day that we have living this life that we have, because it can change in a moment. Like you could be flying high and something happens in life and it all changes. So
right.
We've learned that lesson as a family, and now we're just grateful for her being cancer free and us sort of resuming some form of
normalcy
the life that we had before. But like as we're talking about like passing along things to kids, I do maybe in some ways I'm thankful for that level of adversity, because to be honest, they live a really soft life.
Right.
Like,
gosh. I struggle with that so much. It's like, I want resilient, strong, independent kids.
Yeah.
Humans. I also don't want to give them an incredible life.
Yeah.
And you can't be strong and resilient and independent without adversity.
Right.
I think my hope is that I do it without like trauma, and some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But a little bit of adversity is dang good for us.
Yeah, it is.
It's such a dilemma.
Yeah.
Because like some of my best traits are born out of adversity.
Absolutely.
Like some of those things. And then the other thing, and you just reminded me of it, I'm curious how you're balancing it now too, or like as your entrepreneurship journey has matured, if the relationship with it has changed. But one of the things that I'm really working on is trying to maintain my hunger and an abundance of gratitude.
Yeah.
Because I have it all.
Yeah.
Like I tell my wife it all the time. Like literally, I'm having so much fun. Like my kids are a blast. I drive home. We've got our place in Hesperus. It's just got these spectacular views and chickens are running around. I'm like, this is crazy.
Is this real life?
Yeah. I'm like, this is crazy. I walk in and there's happy kids running around and everything. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like I cannot believe I'm living my dream.
Yeah.
Like I literally am living my dream. It's incredible. And then there's this though, like underlying, like just intense hunger of, it can all go away tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I gotta, it's also my driving, motivating force. And I'm working on evolving my relationship with that so that it leans more towards the gratitude, comfort mentality. But I also think I don't ever want to necessarily lose the hunger and the drive. And I'm curious because, you're where I want to be when I grow up. But does that change? Does that
I would say,
do you still stack? Do you still live under your below your means?
No, we've loosened up. I think that's a big shift that we've made, and it's been harder for my wife than me because I think she's more frugal than I am. But we've loosened up, and we're starting to get more comfortable with spending a little bit more money. But we're not buying stuff.
Right.
We're traveling.
That's
where our we ride nice bikes because that's what we spend most of our time doing when we're able to. And then we make it a point, every year, at least a couple of times a year to travel. And at least once a year we could take an epic trip, and that, and if I had told my prior self what a trip, a 3-week trip to Europe would cost in 2025, what we'd be spending on that, I'd probably be like, my God, how are you doing that? But it's taken a little bit. But now I don't know. I feel like we've reached a point where we've got enough.
Yeah.
And there's not that same need that I had in the past to gather more.
When did that happen? That specifically that what you have enough? Because I've a little bit of context on it, but I'm fascinated with that idea because I'm still very hungry, but I've way surpassed my wildest dreams. Like I never would have imagined I'd be where I'm at now. I definitely don't feel like I have enough yet.
Yeah.
Not in like a greedy, unhealthy way by any means. But talk to me about that, like that moment, when did that occur for you? What did that look like?
I don't remember a specific moment. It was over time, but I think, kind of once I reached a point where I had doubled the income that I had been generating as a W-2 employee, as an entrepreneur now, I don't know when I hit that point, but that feels like sort of the number where I was like, okay, that's enough. I can take my foot off the gas. And that's the financial answer. But I think there's also as my kids have grown older, I want to spend my time spent with them is way more valuable than time spent building something.
Right.
Some people say you should work really hard while your kids are at home and in school, but I think this is the time that I have to enjoy them. They're, my daughter's 10. It terrifies me that she's only got 8 years left before she's
don't bring
out
it up
of the house. I know.
It flies by.
And so I just my priority is not building an empire at this point. I don't know when that shift occurred, but
I would imagine the likelihood of that increases the more you can live below your means.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things that I think is dangerous is when that lifestyle creep, happens like we had talked about, because then it's you have to have it continue to happen.
Yeah.
You know, spending's out of control, this huge house, the nice cars, like whatever, all the stuff, you know, that happens. You don't get the freedom then to enjoy it and to slow down a little bit. Because, you know, to your point, I mean, one of the best things we did, so we bought a little house, and you're speaking about like living under our means, but my mortgage is so low, I'm not even going to say it. You know,
it's an advantage for you. It
incredible.
allows you to. It allows you to take.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Like so we have a 1,400 square foot house with all 5 of us, and it's tight.
Yeah.
In the winter, it's tight, but in the summer, we got the property, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
And we're like we're happy.
Yeah.
We don't need the bigger house. Like it's fine. And I think that increases the likelihood of then getting to that level of, you know, because to your point with the kids, I mean, gosh. Only 8, you're more than halfway through with your daughter.
I know.
And that's going to evolve. Like there's a tiny moment of time where you're their favorite person.
I know. I can already see it waning.
You know?
Like, her
friends, hobbies, whatever.
Yeah.
So how cool to be able to be there during that moment. Because that's the challenging thing, and what's great about entrepreneurship in that sense is, you know, a lot of people, they get their time back late in life. And whenever it happens. Yep. But now people are busy and the kids are grown, and you know it's different.
Yeah.
Like my wife and I, we are unapologetically in our family era.
Yeah.
Like we do everything rolling 5 deep, and we're just like, you know, family it out every time we can.
Yeah.
And I think it's a unique thing because it's like you get to do it while the kids are young and while you're their whole world, you know.
I think delayed gratification is useful with some things. Things like, you know, if you can delay buying things for a long time, that can be helpful to set you up in the future. But I think that's a realization that I've had, is that it's time to stop delaying gratification when it comes to experiences together.
Yeah.
And I have a friend from Twitter, which is strange. I have internet friends that I've on Twitter, but his name's Kevin, and he lives in Boulder. He has something that he says where he reminds you that the good old days are today.
Now.
Like you are living the good old days today. Someday in the future, you will look back on your life today and realize those were the good old days. So appreciate it now.
Yeah. I read a thing on Instagram, because I've got Instagram friends too. You know, but I saw a thing recently that just struck such a chord with me. I'll try to articulate it. I'm going to butcher it, but it was basically this idea that men who lack meaning fill it with pleasure. So like men who lack purpose in their life fill that gap with more meaningless pursuits, like pleasure and, you know, the quick fixes type thing, which is a problem.
Yeah.
But there's this inverse law to that too, that I think that the way it read is more problematic, and that's that men who have a hard time with pleasure fill it with meaning. And I fall into that category sometimes of like, and basically what the gist of it is that it's possible to delay gratification too long. And like because you think that there's going to be that day,
someday,
that moment where I broke through and I made it, or like, you know, I got the number in the bank account's where it needs to be or whatever. And you keep delaying gratification, and that's a new thing for me to consider, because my delayed gratification is why I got to where I am. It's like this whole stacking it, living below our means, you know, not needing much. I mean, I don't remember last time I bought new shoes, you know what I mean? It's like, whatever, I don't care. But at some point, if you do that too long, that's a whole nother problem in and of itself. Like you have to have, so it's like everything else in life, but
it is
balancing.
It's
balance.
Yeah, it's a constant balancing act. That's my favorite. My favorite kids book is the Places You'll Go.
Yeah,
and I think it ends with, you know, that life as a great balancing act.
Right. Yes.
By Dr. Seuss.
Nailed it. Yeah, nailed it. Need to have them on the podcast. Baird, thank you so much.
Yeah, Ben, it was awesome.
It's been a blast. It's so fun. I just want to tell you thanks. It's been so fun to hear your story, and I had no idea the depth and the complexities and all of that. And it's really cool. You've shared with me a lot of really fresh perspectives that I really have appreciated. Like, gosh, the for one, just the fact that sometimes you got to just do the work, you know, and making that happen. And then, you know, finding that balance and living below the means, and like the way that you've been able to balance the things that really matter in life, you know, while also taking the risk and putting it on the line and all of that stuff. I just want to tell you thank you. It's been I thoroughly enjoy the fact that you gave me some time, because I know how valuable that is. But I also just really appreciate what you're doing and putting it out there and helping inspire all of us. So I've got,
thank you.
I know you've seen it a few times, but
sweet.
My tradition are Inspired by Example shirts.
Nice.
Because you
Thank
really
you.
are inspiring by example. And so I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. My kids often, I watch your podcast a lot of the time when I'm on the indoor trainer bike, and my kids will often come in, and so they know who you are, and so that I get to take this home and show them proof that I was actually on this, and then in a week when this is live, they get to watch it.
Let's get them a shirt. So let me know. I'll figure out their sizes. I actually just am ordering some youth ones, so we'll
sweet.
spread it around.
I'll let you know.
Thanks,
Thank
you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.